Find the book of Zechariah in your Bible. Zechariah chapter number 1. If you don't know where Zechariah is, go to Matthew and back up 2 books. Or if you prefer, go to Genesis and go forward 37 books. However you want to get there. But the book of Zechariah, second to last book in the Old Testament. And last week we began our study through this book that will take us about 17, possibly 18 weeks to get through. And gave a little bit of an introduction, a little bit of setting to it last week. And tonight, get into the first mystery tonight as Bible study night. And we're just going to go verse by verse through it. And so Zechariah chapter 1, and we're going to begin reading in verse number 7 down to verse number 17. Upon the 24th day of the 11th month, which is the month Sivat, in the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of the Lord unto Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo the prophet, saying, I saw by night, and behold, a man riding upon a red horse, and he stood among the myrtle trees that were in the bottom, and behind him were their red horses, speckled and white. Then said I, O my Lord, what are these? And the angel that talked with me said unto me, I will show thee what these be. And the man that stood among the myrtle trees answered and said, These are they whom the Lord hath sent to walk to and fro through the earth. And they answered the angel of the Lord that stood among the myrtle trees and said, We have walked to and fro through the earth, and behold, all the earth sitteth still and is at rest. Then the angel of the Lord answered and said, O Lord of hosts, how long wilt thou not have mercy on Jerusalem and on the cities of Judah, against which thou hast had indignation these 70 years? And the Lord answered the angel that talked with me good words and comfortable words. So the angel that communed with me said unto me, Cry thou, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I am jealous for Jerusalem and for Zion with a great jealousy. And I am very sore displeased with the heathen that are at ease. For I was but a little displeased, and they helped forward the affliction. Therefore thus saith the Lord, I am returned to Jerusalem with mercies. My house shall be built in it, saith the Lord of hosts, and a line shall be stretched forth upon Jerusalem. Cry yet, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, My cities through prosperity shall yet be spread abroad, and the Lord shall yet comfort Zion, and shall yet choose Jerusalem. I said last week that the key to understanding the book of Zechariah, any book really, is knowing where and when and who that it was written to. If a modern day Christian or modern day author was to sit down today and write this book in this modern day 2017 setting, then the book would make absolutely no sense to us, because it has a context. If there is one thing that I go overboard on in studying, is context. Because the words of the book have a message only when it is read in the context of the setting of the book. The book of Zechariah, we said last week, is a post-exile book, meaning it's written after the exile. The Persian king Cyrus had issued the decree that allowed the Jews that lived in and around Babylon to return to their homeland and begin to rebuild their lives. There were 3 exiles, there would be 3 deportations, there would be various stages in rebuilding Jerusalem and Judah. You read about that in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. It gives you the history of the era. Haggai and Zechariah are the prophets of that era. Ezra tells how that first group of remnants came back. They almost immediately began rebuilding the temple. They found the exact location of where the altar had been, and they erected an altar. So in the first 2 years, they began construction of the temple. They reinstituted the sacrifices. They laid the foundations and maybe the first few courses of stone for the temple. And then opposition came from outside groups, and the work just stopped. And for 18 years after that initial decree had passed, there's a group that's back in Jerusalem. They are settling into a new life. They're worshiping in an incomplete temple. But there is nobody there with enough leadership to rally the people back up to finish rebuilding the temple. Nehemiah would come years later, like 80 years later, and his burden would be for the walls of the city. And Nehemiah would have such leadership that he would rally the people, and they would rebuild the entire city walls in 52 days. So they could build walls in 52 days, but they couldn't build the temple in 18 years. That's the power of discouragement in a person's life. And so God sends them the prophet Haggai. Haggai is instrumental in stirring the Jews up. A revival breaks out in Jerusalem, and then 2 months later, here comes Zechariah. I said last week that Haggai got them started. Zechariah keeps them going. There's a recommitment to the work. The temple construction starts back up. It's a great time of spiritual renewal for the people of God in Jerusalem. You know, most of the Old Testament prophets, when you read them, have a message of judgment. Zechariah is unique in that he has a message of comfort. And I was thinking about that when I was studying the book of Zechariah, how that some men just seem to have a general message of judgment. Some men just seem to have a general message of encouragement. I know some preachers that come in, and I promise you, they're just going to rip your face off. And by the way, we all need that every once in a while, don't we? But there's other guys that come in, and they're just an encouragement, and they're just a blessing. And both are needed. I would much rather the Lord give me a message of comfort than He would of judgment. That's just my personality. And it would have been easy for Zechariah to come on the scene, look only at what has not been done, and blow them out of the water. But sometimes a preacher has to see beyond the failure to accomplish and see the pressures that causes people to be discouraged. There are poor people. They're properly separated from some kinsfolk that didn't make the journey back, that decided to stay in Babylon. They come back to a desolate and a destroyed city and a destroyed land, and it's got to be overwhelming to start again with absolutely nothing. They're surrounded by the enemies, and they are relentless in their opposition. And so Zechariah doesn't come in with guns blazing. He comes in with, well, in fact, in verse 13 really is the key to the whole book. Good words and comfortable words. And it's a blessing to be able to come to a hurting people and discourage people and give them good words and comfortable words. And so we saw last week in the opening verses, verse 1 through 6, how that basically it sets the theme or the tenor for the entire book. And basically what the first 6 verses does is says, hey, God wants to bless you, but God blesses repentant and God blesses humble people. The judgment is past and God favors you. God wants to shower you with blessings and His presence. But learn a lesson from your history that the prerequisite to God's blessing is repentance and living in obedience to God's Word. And you would think that these people would never forget that, knowing what they've seen in the past 70 years. But Zechariah starts out and says, don't forget that lesson of history. Now in verse number 7, starts a section that goes all the way to chapter 6 and verse 15. And in those 6 chapters, there are 8 visions that Zechariah has in one night. One writer has made the point that these are not dreams, they are visions. The difference is that a vision is given when you're awake, a dream is given when you're asleep. I don't know about that. I do know that the word vision and the word dream both are used only once each in the book of Zechariah. And neither time is referring to a dream or vision that Zechariah had. I find that interesting. But the phrase that you'll find 8 times is the word of the Lord came to me and I saw. Those 2 phrases introduce all 8 visions. It'll help you as we go through them to know that basically all 8 visions say pretty much the same thing. They just hit it from 8 different angles. So 8 different times the angel of the Lord shows Zechariah a message in a vision. Tonight we come to the first one. I call it the man among the myrtle trees. That's what it's about. And I'm going to break the vision down into 2 parts tonight. First of all, the mystery of the emblems. We're going to walk through it just verse by verse. So stay with me. Look if you would in verse number 8. Bible study time now. Look at your Bible, verse number 8. I saw by night, and behold, a man riding upon a red horse. He stood among the myrtle trees that were in the bottom, and behind him were their red horses, speckled and white. So here's how it starts out. There's a man riding a red horse, and he's in a grove of myrtle trees. And by the way, everything is significant. Now, in the Bible, horses are symbols of war. From Deuteronomy to Revelation, horses are used in battle. You ought to go home tonight and read Job chapter 39. Has a long section about the battle horse in Job chapter 39. Somebody's phone is going off. There is an Amber Alert. Everybody's got an Amber Alert, right? All right. Job chapter 39, the war horse, all right? Zechariah 9 and verse 10. I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off. When Christ comes back to fight the battle of Armageddon, he comes back riding a white horse and his saints with him. So horses are symbols of war. Now this man is riding a red horse, Now red can be different things, but I believe that red is a picture of judgment and vengeance. In Revelation chapter 6, one of the four horsemen comes forth riding a red horse, and that represents war and bloodshed in Revelation chapter 6. When Christ comes back in Revelation chapter 19, the Bible says that his garments are stained with the blood of his enemies. So here is a rider. He's on a horse. It's a red horse. So he's riding a symbol of war and judgment and vengeance. The man is prepared for battle. He's prepared for judgment. He's prepared for vengeance. I had one commentator, and I'll not give you everything that I've read that I don't agree with, but I had one commentator that I have great respect for. He says that the horses represent the Gentile powers of Daniel chapter 2. You remember the statue that Daniel saw, and he says that the red horse is Persia, current world power, and that the other two horses, the speckled and the white, is Greece and Rome that is to come. So the man is the executor of the judgment. The horses are the powers who are the instruments of judgment. I don't know about all of that. I can't see that. So I'm going to stick with red horse represents war, all right? And then I want you to notice in verse 8 that he's standing among the myrtle trees. Now, myrtle tree is not a very big tree. It's kind of a shrub tree. About the tallest that it would get is about 8 feet. It usually has white blooms, very pretty in bloom. When the flowers are crushed, it becomes very fragrant, but it's not a pleasant fragrance. It kind of smells. So this rider on the red horse, representing war, is standing in a grove of myrtle trees. Now, something interesting about that. It seems that in the millennium, myrtle trees will flourish in Israel. There is something about myrtle trees that God likes. Isaiah 55 and verse 13, instead of the thorn shall come the fir tree, instead of the briar shall come up the myrtle tree, and it shall be to the Lord for a name, for an everlasting sign that shall not be cut off. The myrtle tree will flourish during the millennium. God filled up Israel with myrtle trees before, and in the end, God will fill up Israel with myrtle trees again. We'll say more about that as we go on. But then I want you to notice not only that he stood among the myrtle trees, look at it, that were in the bottom. I liken that to a low place. It's like a gully or a hollow. He's not standing on top of a hill. But he's down in the bottom of a patch of land standing among myrtle trees. Some commentators make the point that the Kidron Valley, right outside, right below the Mount of Olives, was the lowest place outside of Jerusalem. That may have been the place he's referring to. I don't know. I'm just trying to draw the picture that here's a man on a red horse standing among myrtle trees that were in the bottom, and then notice behind him there were red horses, speckled and white. So now we have more than one horse. Now we have a red horse, now we have speckled horses, now we have white horses. And to make things complicated, just a little bit complicated, we're assuming that the horses had riders. But it doesn't say that they did. In fact, if you look at verse number 11, and they answered, you could take that to be the horses answered or the riders of the horses, but we are assuming, and I believe that they do have riders, but you're at liberty You're at liberty to be wrong and disagree, all right? But there's different kinds of horses. There's red, there's speckled, and there's white. By the way, the red horse portrays battle, the white horse portrays conquering. The conqueror always rode back in the city in the triumphal return on a white steed. Christ, when He comes back riding on a white horse. So these are battle horses. It's going to be bloody, but it's going to be victorious as well. Now here's what we need to do. We need to identify the riders. Look, if you would, in verse number 11. They answered the angel of the Lord. A lot of Bible students believe that the angel of the Lord, that phrase, that when it shows up, it is a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ. But there's a great mystery about that angel. That angel, that specific phrase, angel of the Lord, shows up about 56 times in the Old Testament. There is abundance of evidence, I believe, that points to Him being a person of the Godhead. Case closed until you get to the New Testament. Because then the angel of the Lord shows up there after the incarnation. In fact, the angel of the Lord shows up at the tomb. And He can't be Jesus Christ there. And so we're not 100% confident. Some people believe that maybe it is Gabriel in the New Testament, and it can't be Gabriel in the Old Testament because Moses worshiped the angel of the Lord. Now, several times a person saw the angel of the Lord and then said, I've seen the face of God, representing deity. And so I believe that the angel of the Lord, at least in the Old Testament, that the angel of the Lord is none other than Jesus Christ, a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ. So I believe that the rider on the red horse is Christ. Then we have to identify the myrtle trees because that's very, very important, all right? And it's a little bit more difficult. But nearly every commentator agrees that the myrtle trees represents the nation of Israel. They were just a common tree that grew up everywhere in Israel. They represent the people of God themselves. The fact that they're in a bottom, they're in a low place, speaks of their suffering and their poor condition. They're back in the land, and trees are coming up everywhere, but they're in a lowly place. There's no glory in Jerusalem. There's no resplendent temple. There's no national pride. There's no power. There's no glory. There's no wealth among all the other nations. They're just like a common myrtle tree in the valley. It represents the nation of Israel. By the way, it's interesting that the myrtle tree is only mentioned 6 times in the Bible. 3 times in the book of Zechariah. And the first time the myrtle tree ever shows up is in the book of Nehemiah chapter 8, which is a post-exile book. So the myrtle tree is never mentioned until after the Babylonian captivity. It represents Israel in a downtrodden state after the exile. Israel had been represented by the mighty cedar, but now it would be represented by the lowly, unassuming scrub tree called the myrtle tree. So here's the picture that we have. Standing in their midst is the Lord Jesus, leading angelic army. They're armed for battle. And the battle is going to be bloody, represented by the red horse, but it will be victorious, represented by the white horse. Now again, if that is written in 2017, then it doesn't mean anything. However, if you had been a Jew living in Jerusalem and just returned to the land, that would be exciting because they've just gone through 70 years of humiliation and captivity. A remnant has returned, but nothing has happened for 18 years. They don't have funds. They don't have a leader. They're discouraged. The Samaritans around them are mocking them. Everything else is pretty much still a pile of rubble and ruin and broken down. But there stands their Messiah in their midst, their conqueror. They have no defense if an enemy wants to come up against them, but the Lord is their defense. That's the picture. I've been reading the Psalms a lot while I've been recovering from this surgery. And I've noticed how often David speaks of the Lord as a strong tower, a shield, a buckler, a strong defense. There were times when David, as a person, had no way to defend himself, but he recognized that the Lord was doing all of that for him. And the same can be said for Israel. God is your protector. God is your defender. God is your strong tower. And by the way, history has shown that no enemy is able to rise against Israel, that the survival of the nation has been not because of their strength, but because God has been their conqueror. And by the way, the same thing can be said for the church. Because enemies greater and mightier than the church have risen up against us, but the gates of hell have not been able to prevail. And it seems like that the church lives in a bottom, a low place, a despised place among the world. But standing in the midst is the Lord Jesus, and He is our comforter, He is our defender, He is our conqueror. So there's the mystery of the emblem. Second, the meaning is explained. Look, if you would, in verse number 9. Then said I, O my Lord, what are these? And the angel that talked with me said unto me, I will show thee what these things be. So Zechariah wants to know the interpretation of the vision. There's an angel talking with him, not the same as the angel of the Lord. And the angel is going to show him the interpretation. Verse number 10. The man that stood among the myrtle trees answered and said, These are they whom the Lord has sent to walk to and fro through the earth. So get the picture. Zechariah is talking to an angel. The angel says, I'm going to show you what these things be. Directs his attention to that man that's standing among the myrtle trees. And that man standing among the myrtle trees, he now turns and says, These are they whom the Lord has sent to walk to and fro through the earth. These are messengers, they're ambassadors, they're servants, and God has sent them to walk to and fro throughout the earth. Verse number 11. And they answered the angel of the Lord that stood among the myrtle trees and said, We have walked to and fro through the earth, and behold, all the earth sitteth still in its rest. So these horsemen, they've been out, they've gathered intelligence, now they've come back to their commander to give a report. Kings would send messengers out on horseback because that was the fastest mode of transportation. That's how he would keep contact and know what was going on in different parts of his kingdom. And so God's army has been going out. They've been gathering a report. They've come back to give the report. And here's the report. We have walked to and fro through the earth, and behold, all the earth sitteth still. It is at rest. Now that sounds like a good report, doesn't it? The Persian army was in power. They pretty much conquered everybody. There may be a few skirmishes here and there, but the earth was at rest. Nations were at peace. But here is the underlying problem, is that there is such a thing as false peace. There is such a thing as false rest. Sometimes people are at rest because all is well. Sometimes they're at rest because they are indifferent to the problems around them. You might be at peace in your soul tonight, but have deep spiritual problems. You just don't deal with it. Jeremiah chapter 48 and verse 11 says that Moab is at ease. Doesn't mean everything is good in Moab. Ezekiel chapter 16 paints Sodom as wealthy and as at ease just before God destroyed them. But it doesn't mean that everything was well. And you may be able to say that I am still and I am at rest, and that may be good, that may be bad. And so here's what you will find. The earth was still and when it was at rest, but it wasn't because of righteousness. Because the nations did not respect God. They didn't respect His law. And by the way, let me just say this tonight. I am thankful for the new direction of our country. I am thankful for our president. I think that God has given us a little space of grace. And I cannot imagine what would have happened if Hillary would have gotten in or Obama stayed. I couldn't imagine, all right? So I'm thankful for what seems to be a breath of fresh air and the new direction and what we hope to be years of increased prosperity and national pride. Do not mistake it for righteous peace, okay? Because just because a man comes along and institutes policies, we might be at rest and we might be still. But listen, America hasn't all of a sudden become a God-fearing, moral, righteous nation again. All right? And so it sounds wonderful that the earth sitteth still and is at rest. But I believe that it will bear out that it does for everybody except Israel. Look, if you would, in verse number 12. The angel of the Lord answered and said, O Lord of hosts. Now watch it. Beautiful picture here. Angel of the Lord, speaking to the Lord of hosts. Notice Lord, capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. It's Jehovah God. And he says in verse number 12, O Lord of hosts, how long wilt thou not have mercy on Jerusalem and on the cities of Judah, against which thou hast an indignation these 70 years? And the Lord answered the angel that talked with me good words and comfortable words. Look at verse 14. So the angel that communed with me said unto me, Cry thou, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I am jealous for Jerusalem and for Zion with a great jealousy. Now, jealousy in the Bible is usually a negative emotion. But whenever it's connected to God, it's positive. The Bible said in Deuteronomy 6, verse 15, For the Lord thy God is a jealous God among you, lest the anger of the Lord thy God be kindled against thee and destroy thee from off the face of the earth. Deuteronomy 29:10-20, listen, the Lord will not spare him, but then the anger of the Lord and his jealousy shall smoke against that man. If you'll trace the word jealous in the Bible, you know the first time that it shows up? It's in Exodus 20 and verse number 5. Right in the middle of the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not bow thyself down to them, nor serve them, for I am the Lord thy God, a jealous God. First mention of jealousy in the Bible. And in Exodus 20, 10 Commandments, God is entering into a covenant relationship with the people of Israel. And as soon as he entered into that covenant, the possibility of jealousy comes up in that relationship. Now notice what he says in verse 15. I am very sore displeased with the heathen that are at ease. For I was but a little displeased, and they helped forward the affliction. That's very interesting. God uses Gentile nations, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, to punish Israel for their sin. But now God says, I'm displeased with those nations. Why? Because they helped forward the affliction. They went too far. They carried it farther than they should have. They prolonged the agony. They delighted in their humiliation. They were instruments of judgment in God's hands, but now God is going to judge them for their treatment of Israel. If you'll notice the phrase in verse 2, the Lord is sore displeased with your fathers. In verse 15, same phrase, sore displeased with the heathen. God's anger with the Jews caused him to raise up Gentile nations to punish them, but they went too far, and he punished those Gentile nations. The last week, I've been looking at different books, selecting a book for Pastor's Book Club. And Brother Aaron did it last time for me. And Sunday night, I'm going to introduce a new book, and we're going to split the book club up, by the way, and have a younger class and the teenagers. And I'm not going to give the name of the book away, but Sunday night I'm going to give them a book that is about the Holocaust. The Holocaust. And the fascist and the liberal is trying to erase history, whether it's by destroying Confederate statues or denying the Holocaust. And in this era, history is so vital to a proper worldview. It is so important. There's a preacher, he's made a name for himself with a lot of YouTube videos. Name is Stephen Anderson out in Phoenix, Arizona. You may have seen some of his videos. And I think that his post-trib rapture position is heresy. I hate that position. And his no repentance doctrine is heresy. I deplore the anti-Israel, anti-Zionist replacement theology. I deplore that. And put out a video where he denies the Holocaust. He exposes the hoax of the Holocaust. And I want our high schoolers to read a book on the Holocaust for the day that you run into fools like that. And I'm going to read it, and it's a somber book, and they're not going to be real happy when they read it, but you need to read things like that. And he says they helped forward the affliction. The nation of Israel was judged by God for their forsaking him, but the Gentile nations, even Christendom has helped forward the affliction. They've made matters 1,000 times worse. But Satan, who by the way, Satan, who hates Israel, has been the author of countless political movements and ideologies that have been meant to increase the affliction of the Jews. And who can study the history of the Roman Empire and the Roman Catholic Church and not realize that the Jewish rejection of Jesus Christ has been encouraged by the abuse heaped upon the sons of Abraham by those who claim the name of Christ. I told you about my doctor who is a non-practicing Jew and he's an agnostic. Doesn't believe in God. And one of the things we talked about was the Holocaust. And he looks at the Holocaust and says, how could God allow that to happen? I don't believe in God. By the way, the author that I'm giving this book to is not a Christian. He's an agnostic. They have helped forward the affliction. Now look at verse number 16. Therefore thus saith the Lord, I am returned to Jerusalem with mercies. My house shall be built in it, saith the Lord of hosts, and a line shall be stretched forth upon Jerusalem. God says, I'm back. Jerusalem is not going to just be a downtrodden, ruined place. No, God says that Jerusalem is still my city. The Muslims say it's theirs. You aware of that? The Muslims say that the city belongs to them. By the way, the word Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, is named by name in your Bible over 600 times. You know how many times the word Jerusalem shows up in the Quran? 0. Oops. He says the temple's going to be built. It's been half finished for 18 years, but that's not going to be. By the way, 4 years after the prophecy, this temple was finished. He says a line shall be stretched forth upon Jerusalem. That's a construction term. They're going to measure out the city. You're going to rebuild the city. You're going to rebuild the walls. You're going to return to former glory. And finally in verse number 17, stay with me. Cry yet, saying, thus saith the Lord of hosts, my cities through prosperity shall yet be spread abroad, and the Lord shall yet comfort Zion, and shall yet choose Jerusalem. And if you had been a Jew living in Jerusalem at that time, that would have been good words and comfortable words. Because the situation looks bleak. But to hear God say, I shall yet choose Jerusalem. Isaiah 40 and verse 2, speak ye comfortably to Jerusalem, and cry unto her that her warfare is accomplished, that her iniquity is pardoned, for she hath received of the Lord's hand double for all her sins. That's enough suffering. Now it is time for comfort. Strange vision, simple message. The Lord is in the midst of Israel, promising that He's going to deal with the nation again. And in many of the prophecies, there's a dual fulfillment. There is a near fulfillment and there is a far fulfillment. The near fulfillment for Israel takes place in the next 80 years. But the prophecy awaits a final fulfillment in the Messianic kingdom. We believe the 1,000-year reign of Christ. The temple and the wall would be rebuilt. But this temple would be short-lived and it would be temporary. It's called Zerubbabel's temple. But there's a future temple that's going to be built in Ezekiel 40 through 48. And God will be in it and Jesus Christ will sit on the throne. And people are going to come from all over the world and they're going to worship the King in that temple. No city on the face of the earth has been fought over more than Jerusalem. But no city on the face of the earth is as secure as the future of Jerusalem. He will rebuild the house. He will restore the kingdom. He will reign on the throne. And you and I, as the redeemed of God, will reign with Him as priests and kings. And so really the vision is typical of what Israel will be even in the tribulation. They're going to be downtrodden. They're going to be despised. They're degraded in the hollow. But the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, is going to come into their midst as a mighty conqueror. And the kingdom will be restored. And God will reign. And the temple will be rebuilt. And the city will flourish. And Zion will be comforted. And the nations will be punished. That's the message of the first vision, the man among the myrtle trees.